wrong directions because they flip it when it goes to the broadcast. So that made no sense for the people watching. But we are live on Oilers Nation Twitter, Facebook, twitch.tv/official Oilers Nation, and of course the Facebook page as well. So that is where you can find us and ask us some questions as well. Why not? Why not? We'll answer anything. It doesn't even have to be hockey related, unless it's Surveyor Brett asking me about disc golf, in which case I will not answer that question. But we're going to start with last night's game. We're going to shoot the shit on a handful of things. What's up?
You hate disc golf?
It's a real life bit. Yesterday they started talking about disc golf, and Jay and Wanye and Bagged Milk kind of said like it's not a real sport, like it's dumb. And I disagree. I think it's sick. But they didn't think it was as big of a deal as it is. Like, there's a professional disc golf association and all that.
My answer to them would just be that they've never tried it.
Yeah.
Yo, I was in the office when Jay brought it up yesterday, Tyler. Buddy, I am a disc golfer. I disc golf.
There we
have
go.
A set. I've probably played 100 rounds of disc golf in my life.
Really?
Like, yeah, buddy. Oh, man. Me and my buddy, a couple summers ago, we went and played a twosome, and we shot par playing best ball together. I guess best disc. Not to like nerd myself out here, but anyways, let's talk hockey.
Yeah, let's talk hockey. I'm not letting a second piece of Nation content be derailed by disc golf talk.
I can get going here. I can get going.
All right, last night's game, it was a loss. Zach Lang, what was your big takeaway from last night's game?
I don't know, honestly. It was a good game. It really was. I thought Calgary played Edmonton hard, and that's the way it's going to be now. You look at the way that Daryl Sutter coaches his teams. They love to play that low-event style of hockey. The shot attempts from Saturday versus Vancouver was 70, and it was down to 52 last night against Calgary for the Oilers. So a pretty sizable difference there. So obviously it's tough. I think there's a couple situations where a couple bad bounces happen and the Oilers are on the short end of the stick. Ethan Bear with the pinch on the fourth goal, and you could really use a Mike Smith save there at that point in the game. And then obviously earlier too, he had the puck bounce over his stick, which was a little bit of an unfortunate error in the corner. But you win some, you lose some. These games are going to be tough right now, and Calgary is going to be a hard team to play against the rest of the way.
A mistake from Smith, a mistake from Bear, a mistake from McDavid on the first goal as well. And then they just didn't get a bounce in the final 90 seconds. Same thing with the loss against Vancouver, too. Like, they could have easily gotten a bounce and sent one or both of those games to overtime, and they just couldn't find the back of the net in their last-minute scrambles. The Danalytic, what did you think of last night?
Oh, yeah, for me, I mentioned it there on Twitter. I feel like that game was the same kind of feel as what Toronto did to us 2 weeks previous, where it just felt like a really good, sound defensive game by the Calgary Flames. And I don't know if they've been playing that way since Daryl came in and is actually behind the bench. I don't know if that's sustainable for them going forward, but in the short period now, we need to play mistake-free hockey. That kind of defensive style of game is going to lead to, the mistakes, like you said, with McDavid, with Bear, with Smith, and Calgary was able to capitalize on each of those opportunities. And, we still only lost the game by one. So for me, it's mistake-free hockey. And then like you guys said, it's putting those chances, like that 2-on-1 with Draisaitl and Yamamoto, that should be automatic.
Shoot the damn puck.
At least exactly a shot on net. And we don't even get that much. So it's you have to go for more mistake-free hockey, and you have to go for better stuff. But I want to ask Josh, what's your favorite disc? I'm just joking. Go ahead, Tyler.
Josh.
Oh, buddy.
What'd you take away from the loss last night, Josh Park?
You know what? Just one of those tight games. The first period was absolutely boring. I had a tough time getting into it. And then, the second period rolls around and all the goals that came were off of big mistakes. It was those egregious mistakes by, as you mentioned, Tyler, McDavid, Smith, and then Bear that kind of led to the goals. And that's going to be a new style of Battle of Alberta with Daryl Sutter behind the bench. And, there's moments where you're like, okay, you don't want to pin goals on certain guys. And, if you're gonna come at Bear for that third goal or whatever number of the game it was, then you got to give it just as equally to Mike Smith. But, I don't come after Mike Smith too much for that goal because you're going to take the good with the bad with him. I would say giving up one of those brutal ones every once in a while it doesn't take away from the fact that he brings so much to this team when he handles the puck.
Yeah.
I would tell Mike Smith every day of the week to just keep playing the way you do. So yeah, it was one of those games. There was big mistakes that kind of led to the goals, and there wasn't necessarily anything that was just like a scrappy, like, oh, you kind of wish you had that one back kind of goal. It was just mistake-filled hockey that kind of led to the well, not mistake-filled hockey, but it was big mistakes that led to the goals against. And yeah, there's a couple players that were just, kind of want that one back.
Yeah, again, and there are mistakes throughout a game. Like, Ethan Bear was not the only defenseman who made a bad mistake in that game.
Yeah.
But Ethan Bear was the defenseman whose mistake cost them a goal, right? So that's kind of where it's unfortunate. And you're right, Zach. If Mike Smith makes that stop, I'm not sure. I didn't think Ethan Bear had a great game anyways, but if Mike Smith makes that stop, there is not as much of a public conversation going on about his game right now.
Absolutely not. I mean, we were having this discussion before the show. Ethan Bear, statistically, analytically, was the Oilers' best defenseman last night, beyond Chris Russell, who surprisingly had a really, really good game last night. I'm a big believer in the analytics, and especially in situations like this where, you see, okay, Ethan Bear makes one egregious mistake, and this is where the eye test kind of gets difficult because, you see the big play and you keep thinking about that, right? You keep thinking, oh yeah, but he had that giveaway. But a guy like Ethan Bear does so many small things really, really good throughout a hockey game. Good, clean passes in and out of his zone and all that sort of stuff. So, when you're able to look at the analytics of it, you're actually able to say, okay, well, let's step back from that one isolated incident of Ethan Bear pinching and making an egregious mistake, and let's realize that on the big picture of the game, he actually had a pretty solid game, by the numbers.
By the numbers, sure, but I mean, if you want to go off just Corsi alone, it would tell you Jujhar Khaira was the Oilers' best forward last game, and that certainly wasn't the case. I think sometimes on a one-game sample, Corsi can be a little bit tough to judge. And I think turnover aside, he was fighting it a little bit. He had a couple more rough moments throughout the game. Josh Park, I think you'll agree with me, right?
Yeah, the biggest issue that I have when it comes to numbers and when it comes to analytics is, Corsi's good and it can really help you gauge how a player played. But I have a tough time when, how is Corsi going to come into play when you're watching Ethan Bear overskate the puck in his own end and forces a turnover and the Flames have an opportunity going the other way? You know what I mean? Like, how many times did I see Ethan Bear struggle to corral the puck behind his own net and get the Oilers breaking out in the other direction? And that's where numbers don't come into factor. You know what I mean? That's when you have to look at the eye test and say, okay, here's a simple hockey play that I'm looking for him to make, and it just didn't happen. You know what I mean? I'm critical because I've just seen stuff from Ethan Bear this year that has just made me kind of wonder. But I don't know. That's when I have a tough time with analytics. And I can 100% understand why it can be a valuable asset to, gauge a player's performance. But I don't know. I'm old school in that way when I can watch a game and just be like, why the heck did he do that? Like, what's the thought process behind that play right there? And listen, I'm not an outstanding hockey player, so by no means am I allowed to completely judge someone for the decisions they make in their own end. But, it's just, I just have a tough time when it comes to the eye test. You look at a player and you gauge his performance like that, and you're like, okay, there's some glaring mistakes, but sure, maybe Corsi would back him up in the sense that it didn't necessarily result in a loss of possession, or it didn't necessarily result in a expected goal against, but it's just a mistake. It's just bad hockey. I don't know. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I'm only laughing because Bagged Milk is putting on a show right now in the Twitch chat, and he won't stop putting stuff in there. But anyways, Zach, I'll just give you the floor now to respond.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily agree with or disagree with that either, Josh. I mean, I'm as much as I'm a believer in analytics, I'm also an eye test kind of guy too, right? I think especially when you look at analytics on a bigger scale and a bigger picture, you're able to get a better understanding over time. And I think that's where, one of the biggest differences in analytics is if you looked at just the analytics off last night's game, Chris Russell would be the Edmonton Oilers' best defenseman. But God knows that Chris Russell is far from the Oilers' best defenseman. In a nutshell, on that small sample size, he was, right? Yeah. I think when you start to look at it over time, that's where analytics start to really come into play because, I think it's difficult to, unless you're going to rewatch the game, have an idea of exactly what happened with every 23 players that are, on the team for that club on that specific day. I just don't think it's feasibly possible to have an in-depth understanding of every single player off of a one-game performance like that. So it's an interesting debate for sure, because I'm a big Ethan Bear supporter, and the underlying numbers for Ethan Bear actually say he's having the best season of his NHL career, and this all the while, he missed time because of a concussion and has been slow to come back to the lineup as well, right? So yeah, I see Danny egging us on.
I was gonna say
I'm waiting for a knockout punch. I watched the knockout punch last night. I want another one.
No one needs to fight.
Like,
Josh, you're wrong.
I feel like if you're going to look at it from an analytics perspective, and you're going to say, okay, if you want to judge Ethan Bear's game based off of analytics or the eye test, and then you want to come back and say that Ethan Bear is statistically, according to analytics, having the best season of his career, and you could ask anyone that's watched an Edmonton Oilers game this year, and they were out. And this isn't coming after you, Zach. I'm not by any means saying that, like, what you're saying is not justified at all.
Let's go.
Well, I'm saying that if you ask pretty much anyone that's watched an Edmonton Oilers game this year, and you said, man, according to Corsi, Ethan Bear is just crushing his numbers from last year, they're going to look at you and be like, give your head a shake. You know what I mean?
I would say to that point, Josh, while I agree somewhat, I disagree, because like I look at a guy like, who would you say is the best defenseman on the team right now? Is it Darnell Nurse?
No. Well, I love Nurse. And I know that if you look at the analytics of this guy's numbers, you're going to say that, no, he's not having necessarily that great of a year. I think it's Tyson Barrie. I think the tangibles that he brings to the team.
Barry's having a better year than Darnell Nurse?
So that's where I have a problem.
No. I'm saying that I think Tyson Barrie, relative to the heat that he takes, is having a better year.
What? What does that even mean, though?
No. Listen, Darnell Nurse is the best defenseman on this team. Darnell Nurse is the best defenseman on this team.
Okay, stop.
What I'm
That's
saying
it. That's a sentence.
No.
Let me finish. That's where the issue is for me, is because Darnell Nurse has had some really good games, really great games where he's chipped in offensively, played well defensively, but Darnell's also had some games where he just leaves you scratching your head. And that's where the analytics kind of come in and say, like, for Bears game, he's smooth and more consistently better than Darnell Nurse is with his fluctuations.
The issue that I have, and then listen, Tyler, don't get fired up at me. I agree. Darnell Nurse is the best defenseman on this team. I think that he had a stretch at the beginning of the year there when there was reasoning behind the fact that he was getting some Norris nods coming his direction. What I'm saying is that if you look at it analytics-wise and you look at the heat that he takes on Twitter, if you look at all the people on Twitter that are saying that Tyson Barrie shouldn't be in this lineup, it's ridiculous. The tangibles that he brings to the game and relativity to the amount of heat that he takes when it comes to analytics, I think that he does not get the credit he deserves.
Okay.
I think that when it comes to an offensive perspective, I think that the fact that, whenever the puck is on Tyson Barrie's stick, just watch him. He's so smart. He's so elusive. I swear this guy could play on the second line as a right winger.
So that's a good point, Josh. But to me, that, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, because you're the stats guy here. Tyler, I would also say you're a stats guy, but you're just but for me, I think that those statistics are designed to suss out the better defenseman in this conversation. What Tyson Barrie brings to the game is not necessarily defense oriented, right? And what you're saying, Josh, is that yes, there is a value to that. I also think that Darnell Nurse would be an amazing third line winger on this team. But when he plays defense, he's not the best defenseman on this team. I would say Ethan Bear is the most consistent and best defenseman we have right now for the entirety of this season. Adam Larson being the best defenseman at this current moment.
Darnell Nurse is playing like 30 minutes a game. And he's constantly playing the other team's best players. Darnell Nurse is their best defenseman.
He's up and down.
What?
See, I think Bear is more consistently exactly what you would expect out of a defenseman versus what Darnell brings to the game. I'm not saying that Darnell is bad. I'm with Zach on the statistical side of things, that it shows that Ethan's arc is consistent, whereas for me, Darnell is up and down. And you're right. That's also a situational issue, but.
So I think part of it comes down to what do you how do you evaluate a defenseman in the NHL? Because to me, I evaluate a defenseman by saying, okay, I want somebody who is strong defensively in their own zone, who can win puck battles in their own zone, who can cleanly get the puck out and make a clean first pass. Like, to me, that's what a defenseman should be doing, right? So Tyson Barrie, okay, of course, he's got all of the offensive upside in the world, but this is where something like the analytics come into play so so importantly, because when you look at Tyson Barrie and you look at his ice time with other players, he's propped up by virtually every single other player that he plays with. So the reason that Tyson Barrie's numbers are so good is because of the other players around him. And then you can even start to look at, okay, well, let's take a look at like shot rates, and let's take a look at expected goals percentages, which is what's going to help give you an idea of what the score should be. So a guy like Ethan Bear at 5-on-5, to me, is the best Oilers defenseman in the big picture. Just off the numbers, solely off the numbers, okay? With Ethan Bear on the ice, the Edmonton Oilers have offense at a 27% rate higher than the league average. Okay, you guys following me here? Defensively, when Ethan Bear's on the ice, the Oilers have a 3% better defensive expected goals rate than league average. So that's where you could actually make an argument of Ethan Bear being the Oilers' most consistent defenseman. Now take a look at a guy like Tyson Barrie, right? For Tyson Barrie, offensively, 16% above league average. Defensively, 17% above league average, right? And of course, I'm not sitting here bashing Tyson Barrie or saying that I don't think Tyson Barrie is a valuable player to the Edmonton Oilers, because I absolutely do. I realize what he can do out on the ice, right? But there's so many other of these intangibles that also go into it, right? A guy like Tyson Barrie, he's not giving you much defensively. And as we've known about Darnell Nurse, he doesn't give you much defensively either. They both play very high event hockey and that run and gun sort of style, right? So when you talk about the most important player to the Oilers on the back end from providing offense and providing defense, I think you can legitimately make an argument that it's Ethan Bear. And I'm not sitting here saying this to disparage the great seasons that Darnell Nurse or Tyson Barrie are respectively having, but I think Ethan Bear is heavily hated upon. Maybe not hated upon, but there's a lot of negative stigma that I think people still have about Ethan Bear. And again, at the end of the day, we have to remember that Ethan Bear is 23 years old, guys? Like, he's in his second NHL season, And last year he played a lot of big minutes alongside Darnell Nurse and was a stud for the Oilers last year, right? Because we were all sitting here a year ago at this time, saying, oh, wow, Ethan Bear, he was having a great season when the lockdown happened, right? So I don't know. It's all interesting conversations, to say the least. Darnell Nurse has played 37 more minutes at 5-on-5 than any defenseman in the NHL. When he's on the ice, the Oilers have a 51.76% shots for percentage, and they've outscored the other team 41-32. And he plays he's playing against the other team's best players more than anyone else on this blue line. And I think Ethan Bear has been fine. I think some people are overreacting to certain struggles he might have had, but he's also spent a lot of this year on the third pairing. He hasn't been playing with Darnell Nurse as much as he was last year. Nurse has been carrying that top pairing, and for me, I think that usage is a big part of it as well. The Oilers have been fine with Bear on the ice this season, or good with Bear on the ice this season, but I think for what Darnell Nurse has been asked to handle, imagine two scenarios. Imagine one where the Oilers are without Darnell Nurse for 10 games and one where they're without Ethan Bear for 10 games. In which scenario do the Oilers win more games?
Exactly. Well, exactly. I couldn't agree more.
That's a tough question to ask.
No, but which one? Which one's more valuable to the blue line?
Yes.
Probably Ethan Bear.
No, you want Chris Russell to be your top pairing left-handed defenseman.
Yeah, but
I don't.
There's a perfect point, though, Tyler, as you're saying. Darnell Nurse is not forced to play with Chris Russell as his partner every night. And so, yes, Ethan Bear has not had as much usage, but he's being paired with a guy that tanks his numbers. And he's still not having his numbers tanked.
I don't think Chris Russell's tanking his numbers.
Well, he's hurting his numbers. Whereas Nurse is playing on a top line with the second best defenseman on the team, quote unquote, in that he's the other side of the ice from him.
And to be fair, one point I'll make too, when we talk about a guy like Ethan Bear, when you look at the percentage of ice time against competition, Ethan Bear actually plays the majority of his minutes, 41.1% of his minutes against elite competition, and drives shot attempts at a better rate than Darnell Nurse does.
Boom.
I think the answer is
It's
I don't know.
It's a difficult conversation, but like peak Ethan Bear, I think is a really good defenseman, guys, and that's what I'm trying to get through here.
I agree.
Well, and Oilers fans in general, there has to be a symposium that we all come to, and we all just agree to stop overreacting to like momentary lapses in every element of the game. Like, why is nobody killing Connor McDavid for that play yesterday in the first goal? Because it's Connor freaking McDavid. But the argument could be made for every one of the players on this team that like Mike Smith lets in that soft goal, but Mike Smith is the reason we're still in that game last night. Like it just you go down the way and everybody could be exactly. You could be critical of everybody, or you could take it in stride.
The issue that I have with that is I saw this on Twitter last night. People were saying, okay, if you want to bury Bear for the performance that he put on that one goal when he made that bad pinch, why aren't you have the same energy with McDavid and Smith?
Wow.
It's such a different scenario. Why, like, obviously, okay, Connor McDavid made one bad play there, whatever. Water off a duck's back. Mike Smith, he makes a bad read playing the puck. Okay, I can acknowledge that. But also, look at all the good times he's played the puck this year and all the added value it's brought the Oilers. You look at Ethan Bear, analytics aside, it seems like that's a common mistake, that type of play that he's been making this year. You know what I'm saying? And also, I just want to acknowledge one thing, and you guys can disagree with me on this. When it comes to playing the puck in his own end, yes, I agree that Tyson Barrie is probably, him and Darnell Nurse are even keel when it comes to the best offensive defenseman on this team. I would not take any other defenseman over Tyson Barrie with the puck on his stick in his own end, because I think that's how well he can get the puck going in the other direction. Honestly, if you watch Tyson Barrie in his own end, he's so elusive. If he has people on him, if there's guys bearing down, he's just so good at manipulating and getting around in his own end. I don't know. I'm a big Tyson Barrie guy.
We could sit here and we could argue about the D-men for the next 30 minutes.
Okay, let's do it.
You mentioned the Connor McDavid thing.
Let's argue about Nuge instead.
The reason Connor McDavid gets the benefit of the doubt when it comes to turning over a puck that costs them a goal, it's pretty simple. He's running away with the scoring lead in the NHL. Like, you're not going to be like, that fucking mistake, when he's like single-handedly won them a handful of games this year and is the best player in the league. RNH, we're going to
tell me what Bear is doing.
We're going to end it with RNH talk. Dustin Nielsen threw out an interesting contract idea of 5 years times $6.25 million a year for Nugent Hopkins. My question is, 5 years, 6.25. Who says no? Nuge or the Oilers, or does no one say no? Is that actually what you think it'll be? Zach, what do you think?
I think that's a pretty damn good deal for both sides. I could honestly see Nuge fighting for more money, though. I could see him wanting to get up closer to the $7 million range, which I would still be very comfortable with paying him. I mean, a $1 million raise off of what he's making relative to the value that he provides to this Oilers franchise, I think that's a hell of a deal. I mean, when Rashog reported the other day that contract talks broke off and were around $6 to $6.5 million, I was pleasantly surprised, because I honestly was not expecting that, right? I thought it was going to be much higher than that in these discussions. So I think it's pretty interesting to see that there's these discussions happening in a team-friendly place, a team-friendly space, because, $6.5 million, that is probably, in my eyes, about $2 million less than he could get on the open market with any other team.
I don't think he'd ever get 8, but I think if he wanted to just sign to the highest bidder, he might be able to get into the 7s. Dan, 5 years by 6.25. Is that fair, or do you think the Oilers are going to have to pay more?
I think both sides probably want a longer deal and have that number come down. It's so funny, like, now we're talking about it. I put out the conversation like 2 weeks ago, and I said if his next contract doesn't start with a 6 as the money thing, then we should be upset. And everybody was just freaking out at me, and now we're all freaking out because he's in that $6 million range. Like, it's ideal range for what he brings to this team. It just, I think a little bit of his puck luck is playing into the conversation as well. He hasn't put the puck in the net in the last few games, especially where he's been given the opportunities. I don't get the whole concept of wanting to not sign a guy. I agree with Zach that if there's a 7 in front of his name, and I absolutely believe that there could be, like a Seattle would value a Ryan Nugent-Hopkins pretty highly, but that doesn't make sense for the Oilers, and it doesn't make sense for Nugent-Hopkins if he wants to win right now, which he should. And that's yeah. I mean, to me, it's. I hope it's a $6 million or a 6-year deal, and I hope there's just a 6 in front of the money. And that's all that matters to me.
We now go to our resident Nugent Hopkins hater, Josh Park.
That's not true. That's not true. I'm not a resident Nugent Hopkins hater. I get attacked on every single platform that I go on saying that I'm a Nugent Hopkins hater. Listen, I'm not a Ryan Nugent Hopkins hater. I'll actually go the other direction, Tyler. I think that if they offer him 5.625 is what it is. 5 years, 6.25
6 and a quarter.
I think he'd want the extra year on that. So I think if it was 6 by 6, he'd say yes. I think in that situation, I feel like Nugent Hopkins' party would say no. I would say yes as an Edmonton Oilers fan. Yeah. If his contract starts with a 7, he's got to walk. I'm not re-signing for Ryan Nugent Hopkins for anything north of 7. I like the value that he brings this team. Yes, I understand. He's a guy that likes playing at Edmonton. He plays in all situations. He's a penalty killer. You already know that he has chemistry with a lot of players on this team. But if I'm comparing his numbers to, some of the other guys that are south of 30 years old and are, just recently signing new tickets, this is also a different year because it's a flat cap. And this is a completely different situation. If you compare it to Kevin Hayes' contract, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a fair comparison. Even Braden Shen, Ryan Nugent Hopkins is a career 28 goal scorer. That's the most goals he's ever had in one season. And if you're going to tell me that you want to pay a guy $7 million to play on your second line as your center to drive it, I would say he needs to drive that line. You know what I mean? Up until a while ago, he had a pretty comparable number to Jujhar Khaira in regards to 5-on-5 points playing on the first line with Connor McDavid. I just need more out of Ryan Nugent Hopkins this year. Listen, I don't want people coming after me saying I'm an RNH hater. Bag Milk, if you're still here, man, I love my job.
He's talking about beans on the Twitch chat.
Okay, good. I want to keep working at the Nation. I'm just saying that, I just need more at RNH right now. And if it's north of 7, he's walking. Because I think that we could get a player for cheaper. I don't know.
Dangerous.
I just don't know where that north of 7 came from. That's my thing.
Well, I think he could get that on the open market.
It came from Frank Saravalli in January. He reported that the Oilers were refusing to offer Nugent Hopkins anything over $7 million.
He said the divide in his mind, or what he heard, is that the divide was around $7 million, and that the Oilers weren't going to go that high. Yeah. But it sounds like it's a lot lower than that. Like maybe the divide, like Rashog reported, is closer to 6.5. Bagged Milk, I do not understand what the whole beans thing is in the Twitch chat. That makes no sense to me. But I also...
What is he saying? I'm trying to pull up Twitch here. What is he talking about?
I don't know.
Just
a bunch of beans.
What was Dangerous Wade saying?
He's just talking about freaking beans.
Dangerous Wade said only give Nuge 7 years if he grows the stash back. And that's something I can get behind as well. Anyways.
If he scores a 5-on-5 goal next game, then I'll give him 7 years. But until then, no.
And it all hinges on next game. You go to his agent, you say, listen, he gets a goal at 5-on-5, 7 by 7. Nugent Hopkins is cherry picking at the blue line all game. He doesn't come back.
I was just going to say, he's going to sit at the blue line and wait.
One 5-on-5 goal and you get $7 million.
All right, we're going to wrap it up. We yelled a lot and we got to a lot. Oilers Flames tomorrow night. Actually, no, before I wrap it up, lineup changes tomorrow. If Khaira can't go and you can only throw in one of Cahoon, Nygaard, or Patrick Russell, Zach Lang, who takes his spot?
Give me Patrick Russell all day, baby. Best defensive Oilers forward.
Wow. Hot take machine.
You're on something today, Zach. You're on something today.
I'm on a heater, baby.
Josh Park, you can only throw in one of Cahoon, Patty Russell, or Joakim Nygaard. Who's playing?
I'm throwing Patty Russell on the taxi squad, and then I'm putting Dominic Cahoon in the starting lineup.
All right.
Those are the two lineup changes.
I agree. I'm going Cahoon in the starting lineup. Dan, what would you do?
I'm going to say, Cahoon. I mean, it's boring. But.
Oh, gosh.
All right.
Hey, can I say one thing before you wrap
Sure.
up? Would you guys not understand and agree that, okay, if you're Dave Tippett, and I talked about this yesterday on the pregame show, if you're Dave Tippett and you realistically see Dominic Cahoon being a part of this team in the future and being in the starting lineup in playoffs, why is he not playing? Why is Patrick Russell playing above Dominic Cahoon? I get it. It's a different role in the third line, but why?
Because I don't think Dave Tippett envisions Dominic Cahoon as a part of this team moving forward. I think it's kind of simple as that. I think he likes Tyler Ennis more.
Could you name one thing Dominic Cahoon has done this year?
I set the Oilers record for fastest goal to start a game. I think you did that, right?
Boom.
Yes, he scored
one time.
8 seconds in.
And I think that's
you named something else.
Did that go how you thought it would, Zach?
No, not at all. Honestly, Dad.
He took an awesome
That's not a
picture
little
with
bit.
Tim Stupla and
He
Leon Draisaitl before a game.
Speaking of not going how I thought it'd go, that wraps up this week's episode of State of the Nation, live on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. He's Zach, Dan, Josh, I'm Tyler. Thanks for tuning in. What do we got coming up here? We got Real Life on Thursday. Also, check out the DFO Rundown. And Zach, you got anything new hopping up at the Nation?
No.
All right, well, then there you go. This is all you get.
There's a Scott's Thoughts coming out later today of the Jujar Kara knockout.
Our new friend
Keep an eye
John
out for
Scott
that.
reviewing the Jujar Kara fight from last night. So that's something to look forward to. Thanks for tuning in, Nation Citizen.